So I want to talk a little bit about why I think Mbappe will break all of Messi and Ronaldo's major scoring records. So let's start off with Ronaldo's major scoring records. The most Champions League goals of all time, the most Champions League KO goals in one season with 10 goals in the 16-17 season, and also the top ever Champions League KO scorer of all time with 67 goals. So why do I think Mbappe will break these records? Well, for starters, Mbappe's Champions League scoring stats are a lot more impressive than 25-year-old Ronaldo's Champions League scoring stats. Now, this might not be the fairest way to compare because Ronaldo started off the Champions League very slowly. I think in his first 21 Champions League games, he didn't score any goals. Let's try comparing in a more fair way. Ronaldo only became an elite scorer starting in the 06-07 season, so we should start from there. So, even if we compare 06 to 09 Ronaldo to Mbappe, Mbappe is leading by quite a lot. Mbappe has 0.65 non-penalty KO goals per game, compared to 06-09 Ronaldo, who only has 0.5 non-penalty goals per game in the Champions League KO stages. Now, if we compare that to Real Madrid Ronaldo, who has 0.85 non-penalty goals per game in the Champions League KO stages, there's a gap of 0.2 goals between Mbappe's current scoring rate and Ronaldo's scoring rate at Real Madrid, where under normal conditions, where two players are playing in similar conditions, same level of team, same level of opposition, then 0.2 goals per game is pretty significant. But if we're talking about a player going to a super team, then that's really not that big, right? So if we look at Ronaldo himself, 06 to 09 Ronaldo and Juventus Ronaldo scored 0.54 non-penalty goals per game, compared to 0.85 non-penalty goals per game at Real Madrid. That is a gap of 0.31. And this is not an anomaly, right? So, for reference, if you look at Neymar at Barca scored 0.47 non-penalty goals per game in the Champions League KO stages. When he went to PSG, that dropped down to 0.15 non-penalty goals per game, right? That is a gap of 0.32. So it's entirely conceivable that Mbappe's scoring rate in the Champions League KO stages will increase by at least 0.2 once he goes to Madrid, who are a far better side than PSG, a far more creative side than PSG. Up to now, Mbappe has never really had any proper stat pad sessions in the Champions League KO stages, right? So the closest thing to a stat pad session was against Real Sociedad in the previous tie. But really, that wasn't really that one-sided. It wasn't as one-sided as, for example, Real Madrid beating Schalke 9-2 in the 13-14 season, or like Barcelona beating Leverkusen, I think like 10-2 in the 11-12 season, or like last season when Man City absolutely trashed Leipzig. Like, I think, was it like 8-1 or 9-1, right? So he hasn't been a part of like any of those super one-sided clashes. Those sort of ties are the easiest ties to stat pad. He's not had the luxury of playing in a one-sided tie like that so far in his career. He's going to have the luxury of playing in multiple ties like that once he goes to Real Madrid. Now, these are just the stats for the Champions League KO stages, but the stat inflation will be similar in the group stages. There's no reason why Mbappe's group stage stats won't inflate by a similar level once he goes to Real Madrid. If his stat inflation is anything like Ronaldo's stat inflation after he went to Real Madrid himself, then there shouldn't be any reason why Mbappe can't conceivably break at least some of his major scoring records in the Champions League. So let's now talk about Messi's scoring records. Messi's biggest scoring records are his 91 goal in a calendar year record in 2012, and also his 50 La Liga goals in a season in the 11-12 season. And here's why I think Mbappe will have a great chance of breaking both of those records. So, for starters, prime Barcelona were far more dominant in the La Liga than PSG were, right? They were regularly scoring like 2.8, 2.9 goals per game compared to PSG, which I think in most seasons they scored like roughly maybe 2.1, 2.2 goals per game in the Ligue A. Now, I know people will say, oh, La Liga is harder than Liga, but that's not the most important thing, right? The most important thing is how dominant your team is within the league. And Barcelona were far more dominant in the league than PSG in the vast majority of seasons. Now, the one or two seasons PSG actually were really dominant in the league, Mbappe scored at a rate similar to Messi in his highest scoring seasons. So, for example, PSG were very dominant in the Ligue A in the 18-19 season. And in that season, Mbappe's matched peak Messi scoring rate, scoring 1.23 non-penalty goals per 90 minutes compared to 1-1-1-2 Messi, who only scored 1.11 non-penalty goals per 90 minutes. Now, assuming Mbappe played 69 games with that scoring rate and, took 7 penalties, which is pretty normal over 69 games, then he would score 92 goals over a season. Now, this is a pretty basic computation, but I'm just saying, it's pretty conceivable for this to happen. Now, I know some people will say, and rightly so, they might say, okay, it's harder to maintain that scoring rate over a lot of games. Maybe this is an anomaly for Mbappe. But Mbappe has proven himself to be able to score at a ridiculously high scoring rate over a huge load of games. In the 21st century, he has the second highest non-penalty goal per 90 minutes scoring rate right after Messi. And this is despite him playing in far less dominant teams. Monaco and PSG have generally been way less dominant than Barca in the La Liga. You can easily check it by looking at their goals per game scoring rate. Right? Barcelona in many seasons were averaging, at least 2.8, 2.9 goals per game. Even after their dominance in the La Liga went down a little bit in Messi's later years, they were still averaging, 2.5, 2.6 goals per game. And I find it really strange that people just dismiss the Liga so easily. I mean, Messi himself, when he went to the Liga, he scored 6 goals. 6 league goals. After scoring 30 goals in the La Liga the previous season. It's really not that easy to score in the Liga for PSG, right? They're playing against low blocks every single game. And PSG, for the most part, have not been some offensive super team. Also, if Mbappe scored at a similar rate in the La Liga over 38 games, he would also break Messi's 50 goal scoring record. And if you need further proof that Mbappe will be able to score at a high rate in the La Liga, just look at the Champions League. Mbappe has scored 10 goals in 9 games versus La Liga sides in the Champions League. And these are the good La Liga sides. You have to be a top 4 La Liga side to even be playing in the Champions League. Now, am I saying that Mbappe will break all of Messi and Ronaldo's scoring records? I don't know. Maybe not. But he has a good chance of breaking any one of their individual records. He might not break all of them, but he will likely break at least some of them. Now, I think all of the records are pretty doable, except maybe, I think the hardest record will probably be Messi's 91 goal record, right? And that's not because I think he'll have trouble scoring at such a high rate. It's more so the fact that 69 games is quite a lot of games to be playing in a season. I'm not even sure I want him to be playing that many games. I think up to now he's played at most 55, up maybe 60 games in a season. 69 games is a lot of games. But if he does play that many games, I think he'll have a fantastic chance of breaking Messi's 91 goal record. And to be honest, I value Ronaldo's scoring records much higher, right? I mean, whether you're scoring 2 goals, 3 goals, 4 goals, 5 goals against Getafe or Eibar, who cares, right? That's just stat padding. Why would I care about how many goals he's scoring in a 4-0 or 5-0 win against Eibar? It makes no difference whether he's scoring 2 goals or 3 goals in this game. It's pretty silly in my opinion. I'm much more impressed by Ronaldo's scoring records in the Champions League, specifically in the Champions League KO stage, where you're coming up against Europe's best, where everything is on the line, where you're competing for the premier trophy in Europe, the Champions League, which is far more valuable than the La Liga. And what's scary is that Mbappe's scoring rate on the international stage is far, 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 far above that of Messi and Ronaldo. He's also going to break many of their club scoring records. So by the end of his career, I think it'll be universally recognized that he is a far greater scorer than both Messi and Ronaldo.